Hello, everyone, and I'm glad you've decided to join me with a presentation about presentations. And this isn't just about presentations, it's also about how to keep the medium in sync with the message. What I mean by the medium is these online or digital PowerPoint slides, whatever it is, presentations, and how to work with them so that your message can get across. Now, what you need to understand here is that presentations say a lot about what? They say a lot about you. They definitely say a lot about you. And again, this isn't just coming from me, not my necessarily perspective, but I hear it every day. And even uh, Scott Adams has a lot to say about this. Scott Adams is the uh, creator of the Dilbert cartoon. I'll have a number of these coming through. He's done a great job capturing office life, especially for software engineers, but it applies to many different aspects of office life. Now, this particular one, you know, definitely these presentations do say a lot about yourself. So, not to put a whole lot of pressure on you, but just to remind you that it does make a big difference. And we also hope that these presentations say a lot about your point. What are you trying to accomplish in this meeting? So, and it goes a lot further than software and how to use PowerPoint. Really, if you want to know how to use PowerPoint, go look for another video. This is not the video for you. This is not a technical aspect of it. I'm going to mention a few key things that cause problems with this part here. Uh, whether it's going to cause problems with you or your point, and I want to make sure that some of that software stuff doesn't get in the way of that aspect of it. But this video is not about PowerPoint or necessarily slides or some of those other softwares that you can use for presentations. So this is really about how to get the best of you and your point across. Now, this is intended for generally young people who are entering the workforce. I actually teach engineering at a community college. So but it could be for high school students, even middle school students, and so on. But if you really are not well versed in office life and you're maybe going out and doing interviews, or it's your first big presentation, maybe in a class or something like that, this is definitely yours. Maybe you've already done a few presentations and you really don't like them and you don't know what to do. Hopefully this video will help you become more confident in what you're doing. So the purpose, not of this video, but the purpose of presentations is communication. And in fact, this goes a long way to almost, to many endeavors, whether you're learning writing or mathematics or many other types of things in school. Really, you need to learn how to communicate, and it's about ideas. So we want to communicate ideas. We want to communicate concepts, strategies, many other things that you're trying to get across, these abstract things. But we're also trying to communicate the importance of these things and whether we can, what's important, what's not. You put the first things first, right? So the priorities of what's important. So if you are a political campaigner, you want to, and you're big on the X amendment, whatever that is, and you want to put that forth first because you think that's important. Well, make sure that you put some of these things into practice so that you can get that across. We're also trying to get across basic information. This is true. This is not true. These are the sales numbers. This is the most important thing that you can ever learn. Whatever it is, basic information is also an important thing that we're trying to get across in these presentations. But what's the quality of these things? So you might have basic information such as, 50% of people don't like peanut butter, but what was the basis of that information? So what kind of quality of these different ideas, concepts, priorities, um, to what level should we believe them, whatever, that kind of thing. So not just what they are, but where we get them from and their quality. Now, you might also be trying to make a case, maybe a legal case. You're trying to make a sale. You're trying to say how great your product is, and that's what you're presenting here. You're trying to make a convert. Maybe you're a preacher and you are trying to make a convert. Well, if you have a well thought out presentation and it's well prepared and all that stuff, you'll do a better job making a case, a sale, or a convert. If you just throw something together, you might even be wasting your time or do yourself a disservice. And what we're dealing with here is not uh, it's not rocket science. It's not terribly difficult to do a good job on these things, but it does take some effort and some forethought. So with that, we're talking about preparation. The most important thing you can do is prepare. Now, I've done many, many presentations. I teach for a living and so on. And the most important thing you can do is prepare your material, what you're going to try to present, what you're going to try to communicate. And in so doing, you want to first keep it real, okay? Uh, I've seen too many times people try to just bowl me over with garbage. That's a baffle me with BS or whatever you want to call it. And I see that all they're doing is throwing out amazing words and this and that, and they don't really know what they're talking about, or I can just tell they're trying to snow me. So as soon as that happens, I turn off. I realize these people really know what they're trying to do, or they're just trying to sell me something, and I tune out immediately. So the next step there, it's got to be substantial. You might have a great product, but are you going to do this preparation? Are you going to tell somebody something that they really need to know or want to know? Or are you just going to tell them that we've got the best product on the market? Whatever. So it's got to be substantial. You've got someone in a meeting. You've got their attention for really a very short period of time. It might be the entire hours long meeting, but that's only if you can grab them for the first bit. So it has to be substantial. It has to be real. It has to be important. So you need to do your preparation first. What does the customer want? What do they need? What is the importance of your findings? So if you say, hey, we found something really cool here, but you don't tell someone why it's really cool and what the applications are, then you may have wasted their time. So it's got to be substantial. So bring with you hard facts. Bring with you data, images on this kind of presentation where you've got a projector or something, where you've got a PowerPoint. Use images, use graphs, because a graph can tell you a whole lot more about it than a bunch of numbers. Not everybody's a numbers person. Use the graphs. If you need a key number, so finally, okay, at the end of the day, we saved our customers 25%. Okay, that's great. That's a good number. But bring some other kind of image or whatever that can help cement it in their mind what you're going to present. So keeping it real, substantial, and then very clear hard facts, data, and images. Not just flowery words or fluff to fill in the gaps to make them hope that you've got something good here. Keep it hard, or else you're wasting their time and you might do them a disservice. You didn't just lose the point, you lost your audience. So in order to do that, you really have to do your homework. Make sure you prepare more than you need. So if you have a 10-minute presentation and you need to tell about a scientific finding or present a paper of somebody else, or maybe a combination of papers, make sure you do a lot of in-depth stuff to prepare more than you need so that you know what's important and what's not. You can say, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. So you go through the process of thinking what's important and what's not. So prepare more than you need. And that leads right into the next one. Know your stuff. You better know your stuff because there are going to be questions. And there's going to have to be questions. And that's also one of the things that you should mention. You might say, I really wanted to put this thing in here, but I'll bet you someone's going to ask that question. So you leave it out, let someone ask the question, and then boom, there you are, ready with an answer, and you really made your point well that way. Now, there is always also, remember, there's this person in the meeting. Okay, there's this person in the meeting who wants to look like they're smart. And they might be smart, but the worst thing is they just want to look that way. They're not really trying to contribute. And so Scott Adams has something to say about that too. So here's Wally becoming that guy and figuring out, hey, being that guy, it can be a game. So remember, there's that person. So you need to also be prepared to answer even those kinds of questions. And sometimes if they ask a question they know you don't have an answer for, especially if it's kind of a dumb or irrelevant question but sounds good, always be prepared with that's a good one. I'll get back to you on that. You write down the question, you take the note, and you move on with the meeting. Okay, that diffuses that person and also lets everybody else know that you're being respectful and so on, but that you know how to keep things moving on and you're not wasting everybody else's time by answering ridiculous questions. Okay, more preparation. You need to consider your audience. Okay, if you are presenting something to people who are simply assembling a product, then you need to understand that they might not be engineers. So they might not care about one technical term or another technical term, and you might not want to necessarily have to go in and teach them. You might have to teach a term or two if that's what it really takes, but consider your audience. Again, if you're talking to CEOs or you're trying to make a sale to doctors, any of this kind of stuff, you absolutely have to consider your audience. Think about what they do during the day, what their vocabulary is, what their impatience level is, what's one of the most important things to them so that you can tap into what's important to them, or at least be able to tell them at their level, at their interest, what's so critical about what you're trying to get across to them, what your message is. Speaking of your message, make sure you keep the main thing the main thing. So if you're trying to make a sale, keep the focus on the product and what it can do, or else you might be one of those more aggressive salespeople where you're trying to make them commit or whatever. If that's the case, then keep them on track. However, you might, if they are looking for details on why they should commit, take that as a good sign. Maybe they really are interested, but they really need some more details. Maybe they're looking for a reason to not commit, and so they're asking tough questions, which goes back to the rest of the preparation of doing your homework. But answer the question and then come back around to the main thing. So if you are doing a scientific type paper or an engineering experiment, something like that, then make sure that you recognize that what someone's looking for is maybe your design process or your testing process so that they know each step of the way where you're going. Not everybody wants to see that. So if you only have a short period of time, maybe you have to cut to the chase. So that's your main thing. And so the main thing are the results of your study. If someone wants to ask about your methodology, okay, you can go back and do that. But come back to and it's good to know your weaknesses. So if someone asks you about the methodology, okay, yeah, we had a weakness. There was only a few samples here, but we really believe that this means that we should do more studies in this vein because we think we have a something here. And so that's bringing it around to the main thing, that you had really good results with what you were doing. All right. Considering the timing, all right, so some students are saying, okay, how long does this have to be? And it's dependent. I can spend hours probably on this one slide alone because I talk too much. But there's often a rule of thumb, anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes per slide. But the best way to really get it down is to practice. Okay, so if you've got 100 slides and you're looking to do it in 5 minutes, that's not going to happen. But if you got 5 slides and you're going to need 100 minutes, then that's going to be a killer too. So there's a range in there, but the best thing to do is practice and use a stopwatch. All right. So if you're way out of line once you use the stopwatch, if you're way overboard using a stopwatch, then you might have to consider condensing, or just sometimes it's outright better just to trash a whole slide. And you can just right click and hide it, whatever it is. But then make sure that you use the stopwatch again and make sure you've got it down. Usually you can condense it just with practice. You'll get better at it and so on. But if you don't get it down to the right length, then talk to somebody, ask them, hey, is this slide important? Is that point important? And make sure that you, again, keep the main thing, and don't get too lost in too many details. Again, it's better to have 10 minutes of presentation and 5 minutes of questions than it is to fill up all 15 minutes with what you think is important and neglect what your audience thinks is important. So give them the basic idea, keep the main thing for 10 minutes, and make sure there's a question and answer period so that they can ask stuff. And again, chances are if you've done your stuff, chances are you are ready for answering their questions, which makes you and your point look even better. Okay, so now it is the day of the presentation. Well, the day before, shall we say? Okay, so it's time. So you should maybe make some printouts. Some people are more about saving trees. I'm good with that. So make sure that the day before everybody gets a PDF or some kind of file of what you are going to present on. Okay, if you're going to do physical printouts, then do those printouts the night before, the day before. First off, proofread it, spelling check, and grammar. If you're not good at these things, that's normal. Many people in this world are not great at that for a variety of reasons. A, you should try to get better at it, but also B, have someone else that you trust that's good at this stuff look at it. And maybe it's somebody online, maybe it's somebody that doesn't know your material all that well, and just to have someone look at it, because I can give you story after story of students that have presented something and the spell check itself gave them the wrong word, and sometimes that word's pretty embarrassing. So if you're in class, I'll give you some examples, but not right at the moment. So make sure the words that you have out there are properly spelled, that if you have phrases or worse yet sentences, the grammar is good. So go through it multiple times. I cannot emphasize this enough. It just, one bad spelling word, especially when it's done wrong really badly, it throws a monkey wrench. It's the one thing everybody's going to remember from your presentation, not your point, and then it's also going to look poorly on yourself. Okay, your slides should be neat and organized. So I hope that what I'm showing you here is a good example of that. So when you do the printouts, make sure that they're not kind of a mess and that you've got a good photocopy or whatever, that the staples are right and so on. I also like to print them out where you have maybe 3 slides on the left-hand side, and you have spaces for notes on the right hand side. It's kind of interesting because if you print them out that way, when people get the slides, uh, they have an idea of where you're going with everything, but it might not have all the details that they'd like to see. So it gives them a place to put the notes, and it keeps the slides and the notes right next to each other, but it also makes them look up at your presentation, because they'll get a much bigger picture instead of the little small picture there. It also saves paper, especially if you do it two-sided. So make sure your printouts are neat and organized, and that you are ready for the meeting. So this comes to my next point that I was making before. Make all copies the day before. So the where this comes from is one of the worst days I've ever had in my professional life, where I was a pretty new engineer at this one company, and I had a big design review the next day, and I was all set the day before. I had everything written down. I had my everything ready to go, and my presentation was at 11 o'clock the next day. And I said, I got everything good to go, ready, and I'm just going to make all my printouts the next morning. Oh, Corey, it was actually a pretty good plan, all things considered. So I came in 8 o'clock or something like that, and did my usual, and I just sat down and said, okay, I'm ready. And then I had a couple minor edits to make, so I did those, and then I was ready to print out. Well, the printer didn't work. The printer was jamming. It was crappy. It was so bad, and it took me forever. I had a lot of documents to print, and so then finally I got the printer to work, and then I took those copies and I brought them over to the photocopier. The photocopier was jamming like crazy, and I had a lot of people. I had like 15, 20 copies to make of all these different documents. So by the time 11 o'clock rolled around, I was literally in a sweat. I was halfway done with what I needed to do. Everybody, vice presidents included, were in this meeting room, and it was a disaster. I got absolutely reamed by everybody and their brother, and it was just terrible. I wasn't sure if they were going to fire me at some point in time or whatever. So let me tell you, the next time I had a design review, it was a very different situation. But I had a colleague of mine who said to me, took me aside and said, listen, I heard about that, and let me tell you, always make your copies the day before. Even if you do have a couple of extra edits, that's fine. Tell people about it at the meeting. Don't try to reprint them, or maybe you did, maybe it's just easy to reprint them, that's fine. But just tell people about those edits and you'll be all set, okay? Make all your copies the day before. Now, if anybody knows me from school, you know that I don't always make my copies the day before, but I do my best to be reasonably well prepared. Okay, so I've also been, I had a project in graduate school where I had to do a presentation like this, and I had a thumb drive, right? And I had a computer. Well, whatever reason, something bad happened, and I had to go to my second and then my third backup file. But I made those files, and I was able to do my presentation. If I had just had one file, how hard is it to make a backup? How hard? You can email it to yourself, you can put it on a thumb drive, you can put it on a disk, whatever it is, you can upload it to the cloud, can put it on another computer. Make sure you have copies of your key files, and make sure you've got multiple copies and different formats, because what if you get somewhere and they don't have a proper USB, or they don't have some kind of internet connection is a problem, whatever it is. Make sure you have different copies and different formats of key files. If you do this as a young engineer, young professional, whatever, you're a freshman in college, somewhere along the line, and you do this for every single presentation you make for the next 10 years, I guarantee you, somewhere along the line, you're going to say, man, this is a waste of time. I should never be doing multiple copies or printouts the day before. I wish I hadn't done that. And then there's going to come that day when you're going to thank me for this presentation. Okay, so now we're on that day. You get to the meeting room 30 to 60 minutes early. Now, if it's a meeting room you're used to, You've been there before, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. You can get there maybe a little bit, but you should get there early for sure. Okay. I've been to meeting rooms where I thought I had technology, and guess what? I did not have the right technology. I did not have the right setup. So I had to like download my presentation onto a thumb drive and then put it on their technology or whatever it was. So you make assumptions like they've got this kind of cable or that kind of hookup, and you might be wrong. So make sure you are familiar with the technology. You get there early to set it up. It also makes you feel better. You feel much more relaxed if you've got everything set up 15 minutes ahead of time. Okay. So the next thing you do after getting any technology issues out of the way, you pass out the copies of your printouts, okay? And you put one at every spot on the table. It looks really nice when someone walks in. There's always that person who walks in 15 minutes early, thinking they're going to be the first person in the room. So make sure you're the first person in the room. If it's your big presentation, you should be the first person in the room. Now, next step, food or drink. If you're say doing an interview, this does not apply to you. Okay, if you're on somebody else's turf, sometimes it doesn't make that much difference. But we've brought. I've been on sales calls where we bring bagels or something like that. Water is always a good idea. The thing is though, unless it's except with the exception of water, don't partake because you're going to get those crumbs on you or whatever mouthful of something when someone's asking you an important question. Just make sure you have water, not anything else. But if it's standard procedure, even if it's not standard procedure, maybe see if it's okay to bring food or drink because people always appreciate that. It makes them a little more comfortable, makes them not mind if you go long because somebody else has something important to say. So food or drink, usually it's a good idea, especially water, especially if you're trying to get a point across. All right. Somewhere in there, you should go to the restroom for a couple reasons. So if it's an area that you've never been to before, finding the restroom, the nearest one to your location is important because what if for some horrible reason you have to go in the middle of your presentation as well? You know where the bathroom is. You're not running around searching for it, so you can come back quickly. And of course, the primary reason is so that you don't have to go at all during your presentation. Also, the third reason is to check the mirror. Make sure you don't have, poppy seed stuck on your tooth or some, chocolate on your upper lip or some kind of bad stain on your tie. Those are all good reasons. All right. Speaking of personal appearance, there. Okay. So now you might think I'm a little bit old-fashioned. And but the next bit that I'm going to say is still though very true. People judge you on your appearance. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not even saying it's legal. But people do judge you on your personal appearance. That's one of the first things they're going to do. They're going to walk in the room, especially if they don't know you, and they're going to wonder, can I trust this person? And in part, does this person look like me? Find out what the culture of the company is like. I remember showing up at a interview one time, full suit and everything, and people were walking around this company, and it's actually a fairly well-known company now, but at the time it was more of a startup, and people were walking around in bedroom slippers. I swear. Bedroom slippers, basically pajamas as well. And I'm in a full-on suit. And you know what? I felt a little bit funny, but I felt okay. Because remember, anybody can dress up in bedroom slippers and pajamas, as we are finding out during this the COVID-19 pandemic. But can you, when the time comes right, in the right situation, can you get that suit on and look good? Can you look professional? So, are you going to look like this? Okay. These people, generally speaking, you might go and trust them, or at least from a professional level, look like they care about what's going on. Now, this person, it depends on the culture, but they might be like, hey, dude, what's up? Okay, well, are they taking their job seriously, or is this just the culture of that particular company? Well, you be the judge, but someone's going to be the judge, and someone's going to judge you on your personal appearance. Now, showing up at a wedding like this, okay, maybe it's what they were going to do, but maybe showing up at a job interview that does not require hunting. This might not necessarily be the best choice of personal appearance. So make sure that you understand the culture of the company. It might even be good to ask questions, um, but if that's the way. But if it's your company, make sure you're one of the better dressed people if it's your presentation. Okay, so make sure that it's neat in appearance, that if you use makeup, that it is also appropriate in your hair, all those kinds of things, hopefully, that you are familiar with. And if you're an engineer like myself, it's taken me a while to understand some of these things that are important. But if you're in your freshman year of engineering or sophomore year, then now is a really good time to learn, especially right before you get your first interviews, to take a little bit of care, at least for one day out of the year or 2 days or whatever it's going to be, where you need to interact in a more formal sense. Okay, so what is it for men? Okay, uh, when you are doing a presentation for my engineering class, I expect a suit, shirt, tie. This year, when we are presenting from our computers, slacks are probably optional. I guess you can wear jeans. We probably won't see you, but maybe business casual, whatever that is, but not for my presentations. You should have suit, jacket, shirt, tie, and look very professional in that way. Do you need a full-on double-breasted suit with a vest? No, but you should by this time start investing in that kind of wardrobe, because you're going to go on interviews pretty soon, and you're going to need to look professional in the not too distant future. So now is as good a time as any to work on that. For women, now I have less um, less advice there. But suit, dress, pants, however that worked, accessories. I'm no expert there, but you might want to get advice for any of these things. I have to admit it. When I first went out, I got advice from my mom. All right, that's okay. If you got a girlfriend, boyfriend, alien friend, whatever it is, there's all sorts of stuff online, and hopefully you've got a mirror. So between those two things, the three things: friends, mirror, and the internet, you should try to get some advice. That's if you think you need it. Some people, they know what they're doing already, and so that's pretty good. But for everybody, grooming and hygiene. Okay, take care of your hair. Shave, or at least have whatever beard or facial fungus that you have. Make it sure it's neat and appropriate. Make sure your teeth are brushed. I mean, I hate to say all these kinds of things, but go through all of those kinds of things. Make sure that there's nothing there that someone will judge you on to make them ignore your message. Because people do. Again, I'm not saying it's right, but people do. And, truth be told, I'll bet you judge people on how they look as well. Piercings. That came up as a question once. So I think it depends a lot on the company culture. So if they're a little bit more straight-laced and you don't see anybody at their company with piercings, then you might not want to make that, especially on an interview. If you are in the company already and everybody, pretty much everybody and so on, it might be fine, whatever. But I've had students with pretty large gauges in their ears, and it was a little distracting. Tattoos are a lot more common now, but even so, make sure that nothing's there to distract others from what you're really trying to get across. Now, if you're trying to sell gauge earrings, well, then of course wear them by all means. But if you're trying to tell someone why they should use your steel instead of somebody else's steel, then maybe, if anything, get some steel gauges and tell them that's your steel. Okay. Finally, on this slide, what to do with your hands. Now, I am a big fan of telling people that when they put their hands in their pockets, it makes them look bored. Or worse. I'm not going to go into why it could be even worse, but I'll let you use your imagination. It could look really, it can look pretty bad. It looks like bored, that you're disinterested, or you really don't know what you're talking about. So it's trying to give the message to everybody: don't ask me a question. I don't know what I'm doing. Well, if you don't know what you're doing, then what are you doing up there? What are you wasting my time for? Okay, so plan ahead. That's one of the reasons I like having a remote clicker that can make my slides go forward, and it uses Bluetooth or something like that, because I have something to do with my hands. I've got a prop to hold. So if you have props, for example, if you're trying to sell something, you're trying to show something, something physical, then use that. If you don't have any props, or it's inappropriate, then do something different. But if you have to wait for somebody, put your hands behind, cross your hands, your arms behind your back or in front of you. Keep them down at your sides. Don't lean on anything. Again, that makes you look kind of bad, bored, whatever. That this isn't important to you, or that you look particularly unconfident. Even if you are unconfident, you shouldn't be telling, or broadcasting it with hands that are in your pockets. All right, so plan ahead on that. And here's Dilbert again. So no casual dress, but this should be interesting. All right. Now we get to PowerPoint and pointers for PowerPoint. All right, first off, you should have good organization. You should have a real clear case of where you're going and how it's going from one place to the next. If your different sections are kind of all over the board, they don't make sense to go from one to the next, that can really cause a problem. So if you're putting the cart before the horse, you're talking about the introduction, then the conclusion, and then something in the middle, and then the conclusion again. I've seen that kind of stuff. It gets really messy. So make sure you have some kind of logical progression. Make sure it flows well. You also want to have an appropriate pace. Now, I may have dwelled a little bit too long on some of these slides here, so maybe my pace was a little bit slow. But make sure that you're not on one slide for ages and ages and then blow through some of the other ones, because it can bewilder the audience. Make sure you got a good pace to go with your points for each page, and the switching of the pages themselves. All right, so as you're going through it, if that's all you're doing is going through the slides, then it can get pretty boring pretty fast. So I like to say, use breakups, bridges, and humor. So I've told a couple of stories here that aren't actually on the slides. Stories are great to give a picture of what's going on, and sometimes people remember the stories better than they remember what's on the slide. I mean, it's only been a few hundred years that we've been consistently passing knowledge down from generation to generation by the written word, okay, at least on a large scale. And in fact, we haven't had large scale literacy for more than 100 or 200 years. So we told stories from ages and ages ago. And so, the Bible is full of them, and other sacred texts are full of them. Jesus taught in parables. That's one thing he did a lot of. So stories are great. Other bridges. So how are you going to go from one section to the next? And saying a segue or something to that effect. How are you going to tie the first section to the second section, the second section to the third? So think of those bridges. And of course, I've used a little bit of humor in here to break it up and keep the audience's attention. Yet, at the same time, I'm making a point. All right. If I haven't mentioned it before, I'm pretty sure I have, but I'm going to mention it again. Proofread, for the love of you do not write it right the first time. I have taken this exact same presentation And I have modified it multiple times because I've used it, and sometimes things worked and sometimes they didn't, and so on. So proofread, go over it and over it, and again, practice. That is the number one thing that's going to make you more confident. I know a lot of people do not like to do presentations. Number one reason, they haven't practiced, they haven't tried, they haven't done it. That is the number one reason. I don't care who you are. Now, there are other people that are particularly, say, introverted, but if you go to Toastmasters, they will tell you stories upon stories of terribly, painfully uh, frightened people who have gone to them and said, how can I get better at speaking in public? And they have helped them. And these people can get over those situations. So it's really practice. And if you need to go to Toastmasters, go ahead. That's a great organization that will help you become very good at public speaking. All right. Last bit on this slide is PowerPoint pointers is avoid DBPP. Now, I think you might be in jeopardy of that right now. DBPP is death by PowerPoint. Yeah, that's what that is. So avoid that. Get up there and do your presentation, smile a lot, and avoid killing your audience with DBPP. Now, these are only a couple of the Dilberts I had about that. Yep, I'm not kidding about that. This death by PowerPoint is a real thing. See, it's documented right here. Yep, another one. Another one. Well, this is a comatose PowerPoint thing, but it's true. People can just sit there and look, and you think that you're communicating to them, but really they've fallen asleep or they're thinking about their cat mittens or something like that. So, but in this case, this person was, died because they fell asleep with their finger up their nose. I don't know how it all worked out, but it's a pretty sad situation when people die by PowerPoint. Okay, more PowerPoint pointers. All right, so when it comes to the actual slides, start and finish. You should have a title page, like I did here, which was the presentation title page, and an introduction. Tell people what meeting you're in. Okay, there's some people who are in the wrong meeting, so let them know exactly what they're gonna be seeing here. So, an introduction page. What are we gonna cover today? And that's really good because you might have your main point on that page, and somebody tunes out. Hey, at least they saw the main point. If they didn't see any of the rest of your presentation, or maybe they had to leave early. So put your introduction in, telling people what they're going to see. And there's your main thing. Okay, what are we going to be talking about here? That's something that's key again. Some people leave meetings early. Some people get particularly comatose. So make sure your main thing shows up early in your presentation. All right. So then after going through your whole main thing, come to conclusions. Tell the audience what you want them to take away from this. So if your conclusion is buy my product, if your conclusion is this steel or this design is better than that design, well, tell them that instead of just trying to say, well, I hope they figure that out. I was just too lazy to make one more slide. Come on, guys. Slides are easy. You right click and you duplicate the slide. It's not that hard. Right click, new slide, whatever it is. Slides are cheap, okay? They're not that hard to work with. Make another slide and tell them what they should have known. And then finally, make sure you have a questions and a thank you slide at the very end. People want to know that it's over, when to ask questions. If you just end with that blank black screen, which is really, really annoying, then people think it's kind of a jolt. And it leaves the audience a little bit confused. Can we ask questions now? Or did I miss the questions page? Or is the time up? Whatever it is. No, this tells them exactly what to expect. You expect questions here, and you are also thanking them for their time. All right, so definitely have that page too. All right, more PowerPoint pointers. The text. This is something that's very lost on this generation. All right. The text has to be legible in the presentation room. So right now you're probably staring at a screen that has a contrast ratio of like 12 million to 1. All right. Uh, Maybe it's, depending on how you measure it, maybe it's only 10 or 20,000 to 1. And that's fine. Well, those projectors, if you're in a room with a projector, first off, those projectors might have the same kind of thing, but that's measured in a completely dark room. If you have any ambient light, your contrast ratio drops like a rock. Okay, so these contrasts that you're seeing on the screen are way better right now. So when you're making this presentation, they're way better than they will be in a room. Now, then you're also what, 2-3 feet away from your monitor? I'm betting about 2 feet, clearly less than a meter. The people in the room are all going to be much further away, so it's going to be harder for them to see it. The third thing is there's people like me who need glasses. Okay, and we have older eyes. They're just not as good. So you need to make, each time I say something like that, that's 10 times. So you need to make your text 1,000 times more legible than you expect. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples in a bit, but it has to be legible in that presentation room. So make sure it's the appropriate size. You cannot jam a ton of text into this onto this page, because you have to break it up into multiple pages. And like I just said, slides are cheap. Come on. Font. Some people love to have a fancy font because they think it's going to make things look really cool. Well, they don't. Okay. Now I have what's called a serif font, where you can see right here on the F or the T here, these are serifs. In fact, this is probably not the greatest font to use. If you see meme fonts, the impact font, they don't have little tails and serifs. It's because it's easier to read them. They just kind of make that much of a bolder statement. So maybe this is a bad example here. But notice I'd still use a fairly legible font, nothing crazy scripty or anything like that. So make sure that that is a very legible font. And background interaction, oh man, I'm going to show you a good example of that. There's a reason that they have these types of backgrounds that come canned with PowerPoint or slides or whatever software you're using. Use one of the canned ones. Just go deep so it's not the same one that other people have used. Unless you are a graphic designer. If you're a graphic designer, then you should make your own, but make sure that your background interaction is not a negative thing. And did I mention that you should proofread? Yes, definitely proofread your text. If I didn't mention you should proofread, make sure you proofread. Not just you, get somebody else to proofread it too, especially if you're not that comfortable proofreading your own stuff. Your own stuff always looks better to you than somebody else who's going to be a little more critical. Yeah, and that's another thing. Make sure you pick out somebody who's going to read it that's really going to give you the truth. All right, so let's look at this example here. This is an example of throwing a whole paragraph onto a page. Now, this might make sense in terms of this particular paragraph because it's a reference to an important document, the First Amendment to the Constitution. But you should not be throwing a whole bunch of text up on the screen like this, because if you just sit there and stare at it, no one really wants to read all that. You should have bullet points like I'm showing, and we get to that in just a second here. So you should have very few words per line. You should have maybe 3 to 8 main bullet points per slide. Okay, maybe I break that rule here a couple of times, but keep that formatting consistent. Now, you don't have to keep it consistent all the time, but it's important because otherwise it gets distracting for the viewer. Not just grabbing their attention, but actually distracting them. And I think I've mentioned spelling and grammar before. Yeah, make sure that you've got the right spelling of everything, the right grammar. And also, if you just use phrases like you're seeing here, then you don't have to worry as much about all the parts of speech and having a proper sentence and so on. So it makes it easier. Speaking of, this is not your speech. Absolutely, this is not your speech. You should never, ever, ever put a bunch of words on the screen and then just read them off. That is insulting to your audience. Your audience knows how to read, at least you would hope so. Hopefully your audience knows how to read. That's why you put the words up there. They can read those words. These are your notes and the things you really want them to know that you're talking about. So the basic notes and highlights of your presentation, and it helps them follow where you're going with this. You should know your stuff well enough so that you don't need to have those notes up there. If you have note cards that you want to, kind of remember some things, that's great. But you should just use this as your basic notes and highlights. Let your audience read this and you talk about the details. And that's where I came to this. Sentences or passages for quotes only, just like the previous slide there. Okay. And I think I mentioned something about proofreading, but if I didn't, well, make sure that you do exactly that. Make sure you proofread, all right? Now, here's an example of other PowerPoint pointers. All right, so graphics. Okay, what are we going to do for graphics? How are we going to put them in? Graphics are great. Make sure you use graphics because no one wants to just sit there and look at words. So you can use backgrounds and themes. So here I have this beautiful landscape of Monument National Park. Can't wait to visit there. I've visited a lot of others, but I can't wait to go here. So backgrounds and themes. Notice my word backgrounds here is actually going against a light sky with very high clouds, and it's hard to see. It's kind of hard to read it. Now remember, I'm sitting, like I said, less than 3 feet away from my monitor. And what if I'm sitting in the back row and you've got a projector on a screen with a lot less contrast ratio? This is not going to show up, I guarantee it. So careful when you're choosing backgrounds and themes. Again, I'd stick with some of the canned stuff that you have in your program. Okay, clip art is a great way of just kind of emphasizing something. So this little clip art shows that time is money. Speaking of time, kind of getting long on that here, but that's okay. So clip art's a great little thing to use to emphasize a certain point. It breaks up your text so that your audience is more likely to get involved, or at least try to look and try to figure out what that's all about. Oh, time is money. That's the point he's trying to get across. Stuff like that. All right. And embedding video. Ever since I can remember learning PowerPoint many years ago, and PowerPoint honestly isn't that hard to do, but they have yet to really make video work properly. Maybe you're a master at it. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing, but I have yet to really find video well embedded. That's number one. Number two, if you ever wanted to say, someone says, "Oh, hey, send me that PowerPoint," and the video is an important part of it. It might not come through properly, or you might forget, or whatever. Then do it separately. Have it as a link, and then you go to that link, and it might be a little bit clunky in the software, but it might be worth it instead of trying to embed it in the PowerPoint. So good luck with that, and I hope you do well. And if you do, hey, post a how-to video on it and send it to me, and I'll watch. All right, I guarantee I'll watch. Oh, isn't this adorable? It's such a koala. Who doesn't want to see a koala bear? Well, the background. Let's just see what happens with the background. Now, I'm having already a hard time reading my PowerPoint pointers heading here. And more about graphics, of course. So what are you going to do with pictures? Putting them in the background, maybe not such a great idea. So, but put pictures in there. Put graphs in there. They're really, really important. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and every picture tells a story, don't it? These are important truisms. And if you're trying to get your main point out and not try to waste everybody's time, pictures are great. Graphs are great. But make sure your background's good. So you see this graph? These are our sales numbers for the first quarter, second, third, and fourth quarters. And parkas, jackets, and polos, I can't even see half of the percentages on the left-hand side. Okay, and that background really distracts from everything. So make sure that you've got um, a background that really works, and test it out, try it out. And if it doesn't work, get something different or change your graphs or something like that so that there's better contrast so people can actually read it and they're not saying, boy, this person didn't go through their presentation well enough, so I have no idea what's going on. Forget it. They'll reject you for that. All right. This whole slide is pretty much about a particular student or two that thought that they could just say, hey, we're going to have a really fun PowerPoint because we don't know what we're doing. So they did all sorts of animations. And yes, animations, as you've seen, can draw attention to the subject at hand. But I really ask you, maybe it's just me, but I ask you to restrain yourself, because first off, doing these animations takes some effort, and you sometimes practice them, or if you don't do them right, they might not work right. So you better take some time to debug them. And doing these things makes it kind of look silly. And if you're trying to make a good point, you don't want to look silly. So now I've got the key points are flashing and doing weird things, and also if you have formats of these different slides, shift them, that's fine, but do it for needed emphasis. Say you're going from one type of thing to another, one chapter to another. Okay, shift your formats because it might get kind of boring. Maybe you're bored right now seeing the same format over and over. But oh, there goes that. Oh, so that's how that worked. Well, I knew how that worked, but I'm trying to make a point here that maybe you wanted that back, but nope. So as you move forward, oh, there goes to, okay, so you better know how those animations work, or else things are going to look really silly and maybe you're not going to know what you're doing. So keep it simple. I think that's probably a better way of putting it. Now, when you're speaking and you're in front of a bunch of people, I have a bunch of do's to do. First thing you do is practice. Practice, practice, practice. There's nothing. And I've helped a lot of people learn to speak in front of people. I've seen teenagers do it. I've seen, middle schoolers, high schoolers, college students, adults learn to do this, and there's nothing like practice. Practice in front of a mirror. Practice in your car. Practice in front of your significant other. Practice in front of your dog. Doesn't matter. The more you say what you're going to say, the more confident you're going to be. Practice, practice, practice. 2, keep eye contact. Okay, make sure that you are looking at your audience in the eye. That's what they want to see. In fact, as babes, we are, as newborns, we are basically programmed to look at the eyes of our caretakers. That's some of the first things that babies, infants, learn to do, is recognize the faces and especially the eyes of their caretakers. So make sure you do that. Smile. I use the example of ballet dancers. Now, my kids have all taken ballet, and they've all been ballet dancers for years. And that's one of the main things that makes them look good, is that when they are doing their dances, whether they're difficult or not so difficult, if they are smiling or otherwise appropriately expressive, it looks effortless. It looks like they are amazing. Even if they're not doing much, if they are smiling, that's one thing. If they are grunting and looking like they're working hard, no, that's sports, okay? That's not an art form. That's sports, but this is an art form. So when you're speaking, smile. People want to see that you are excited to be there. Even if you're not, just smile. Whenever you forget to do something, smile. If you lose your place, smile. Whatever it is, just smile as you're doing it, and you'll be able to make it through a lot better, and people will say, boy, that was a good presentation, even if it had a lot of mistakes. Smiling nervously, laughing, that's another story, too much. But just act positive. Now, people say a lot, and that's part of the don'ts. It's okay to have those pregnant pauses. If you'll notice, I've had that in this presentation a few times. Catch your breath and your words. So if there's a point where you're like, wait a minute, I'm not sure what I was going to say next, it's okay, absolutely okay, to take a deep breath, look at your notes, look at the screen, clear your mind, try to remember what was coming next. It's absolutely okay to have that kind of dead noise. You don't like dead noise on the radio because you can't see what's going on. If your audience can see you and they know that you're preparing your next sentence, that's fine. And you know what? You might be going through something kind of quickly, and you might want to give your audience some time to chew on what you just said. So let them chew, and you sit there. You do not have to say to fill the vacuum. And it's okay to gesture. It's okay to, you don't have to act all, stereotypically Italian and flail your arms around. But it's okay to point. It's okay to gesture at the screen. I'm doing it right now, and I'm recording in front of nobody. So it's completely okay to gesture, and just don't make too much of it, I guess. So there's the next list is the don'ts. Number one don't. Please, for the love of everything, do not read off the screen like a drone. Nobody wants to come to your presentation. No one wants to listen to you if all they had to do was get the slides and read the dang slides. Okay? They want to know about you. They want to know about your point. And like I said at the very beginning, that's the point. They want to know if they can trust you and what they can get out of this presentation here. If all they need are the words of the presentation, then just give them the words of the presentation and don't waste their time. So don't read off the screen like a drone. You better know your stuff. You better just have notes on there and know your stuff well enough that you can go off the notes and tell them more of a story of what you know, and that those things on the screen are just some notes and highlights that they need to just remember and be cognizant of and know where you are throughout your story. So here's another great example from Scott Adams. All right. Again, I mentioned this before. Don't keep your hands in your pockets. Maybe putting your thumb on your belt or something like that for a bit, whatever. That's okay, but don't make a habit of it. And finally, don't say a lot. It's okay to say sometimes. But one of the number one things, believe it or not, one of the number one things that makes people say is having their hands in their pockets. Also right up there is not enough practice. Now, remember that guy or that gal, whatever, that I told you that sometimes shows up at your meetings? There's usually somebody somewhere, and you'll see this person that asks questions just to make themselves look cool and cause problems, really. Well, they can make you want to be defensive. They might get you flustered. Some people are like that. Some people just thrive on that kind of drama. Don't let them. Remember, if they say something that's stupid or is trying to, is obviously trying to get your goiter, I'm not sure if that's really a term anymore, but if they're trying to get you riled up, everybody else in the room probably sees that. Okay? They probably see that. And they're like, boy, that guy's a jerk for asking a question like that. But then they're going to watch you and see how you react. If you react flustered or defensive, they're going to say, wow, that, he can't take the heat. Okay, fine. We learned that about you. But if instead you take it gracefully and you say, oh, okay, yeah, I see your point. We'll talk about that later. If you can take it with grace, they're going to say, whoa, look, he diffused that guy or that guy, whatever it is. And if you let someone like that take control of your meeting, then that's going to be bad. Instead, if they keep pushing some point, you say, listen, we'll take that up in committee. Right now, we don't want to move forward. If that's a critical question, we'll have to deal with that, sure, but we need to get to the rest of this to put it all in perspective. Okay, so be kind, but be assertive and gentle as you can, and as diplomatic as possible. And people are going to see that, boy, he handled that like a pro. That's what you want to see. All right. So that's what you want for your speaking do's and don'ts. All right. Finishing up, let's look at what we've got here. Presentations are a reflection of you and your point. Again, in that order. All right. People are not going to consider your point unless they know a little bit more about you. All right. Another important bit, maybe I didn't make it as clear as possible, but make it the best you can do. Don't settle for good enough. In fact, don't say, oh, I'm just a college student, what do I know? Take it upon yourself to say, hey, how can I do this better? Watch some TED Talks. Watch some TED Talks and see how some of the pros do it. Okay, pretty easy to see. So go and see how they use their data. See how they use their humor. See how they use what's up on the screen to get across their points. See it where they walk on the stage. See what they do with their hands. See how much they smile. Okay, so don't settle for good enough. Take these points and make them yours. All right, so we also need to consider, yes, the content, and that takes a lot of preparation. It takes consideration of the material, doing your homework, anticipating questions, those kinds of things. But you also have to consider your appearance. People do judge you. Understand the culture. When in doubt, really the default should be to look professional. Wear a suit and tie. See what it's like if you're at a particular company. You've probably been to a few meetings. Take notes. See what other people do. Okay? Lots of preparation. Preparation is key. Practice. You got to check out, whether, maybe food is appropriate. All those kinds of things. You want to be well prepared. Get there early. Get those photocopies done the night before. All those kinds of things are going to make everything go way smoother than maybe you anticipated. When it comes to PowerPoint, all right, PowerPoint's only a tool. And make sure you balance your content with attention. So you see I'm using these animations. I think they're a little bit cheesy, but maybe it's a point that you need to do. But they can be distractive. All right, so PowerPoint is only a tool. It's a way of getting these things across, but it can also make you look bad if you're not using it well. If you put too many words in there, if you're trying to baffle people with BS, if you're trying to do too many fancy things, if you're trying to do all these fancy things, then maybe you should have spent more time getting your content straight. So use good practices and practice it, especially if you've got a different. How are you going to click it? Is the computer way at the back of the room? I had that before. One time the computer is at one part of the room and I was at the other side of the room, and I needed to use a remote clicker. Luckily, I have one. I've practiced with it. I know how it all works, and it was all good. But if you don't know, then hey, that's where that practice and that preparation comes in. When it comes to speaking, again, practice, practice, practice. I would rather be well practiced with some note cards on 3x5 note cards in front of a room than throw together a PowerPoint and never practice it and try to do that. Trust me, it's way better to make sure that you are well versed in what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And avoid the easy problems, things like where you're going to put your hands and the technology issues, stuff like that. And another easy problem to avoid is It's a habit all of us have. I'm sure I've said it many times in this particular presentation, but it's not really all that noticeable unless you do it way, way, way too much. It's an easy problem to avoid. Practice, and don't put your hands in your pockets, and recognize that it's okay to have that pregnant pause that allows your audience to chew on what you just said. All right, fine. We are now at the end. So I would normally ask for questions, but considering this is a recording, um, you can probably send them to me down at the bottom with the comments, and hopefully I'll get back to you on them. But until that time, I thank you for your patience and making it all the way through this video, and I hope it's been very, very helpful. So have a good day, and check out my other videos if you want to learn more about engineering or many of the other subjects that I have.